Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. I'm your host Mike, and this week's episode is a special OMG Kitties deck tech from the Secret Lair product that Wizards just released. OMG Kitties is a 7-card drop that features 7 cats from Magic the Gathering's history. So we're going to build a $100 commander deck based on Arahbo, Roar of the Wild, which is included in the Secret Lair drop. Arahbo is 3, a green and a white for a legendary creature cat avatar. It has Eminence. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if Arahbo is in the command zone or on the battlefield, another target cat you control gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Whenever another cat you control attacks, you may pay 1, a green and a white. If you do, it gains trample and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. So we're going to build this Arahbo deck as a tribal cats deck. Arahbo cares about having a lot of cats on the battlefield, as its Eminence ability will pump those cats up. And then if Arahbo's on the battlefield, that cat that you pump up, you can also use its ability to pump it even bigger. So we're going to try to get in some major damage with our cats. Our strategy for this deck is to ramp up early so that we're able to put a lot of mana onto the board, that we're able to invest into casting all of our creatures that we have in this deck. We do have quite a few ways of drawing cards off of casting creatures, so we want to keep that engine going by having some ways of getting some mana down on the battlefield early. We are playing a very aggressive strategy in this deck. We do have all of the best kitties in this deck. We included all of the cats from the OMG Kitties drop from Secret Lair, so you can put all those into your deck. And then we filled it out with all the best cats in Magic the Gathering that could fit in our budget. Then one of the best ways of pumping our creatures up and getting them very big for Arahbo's ability is by equipping our creatures. There's a lot of synergy between cats and equipment. A lot of the cats have an ability that when they're equipped, they do something like create tokens or get an extra ability. So we included quite a few equipment in the deck that go with this strategy. We do have a life gain sub-theme in the deck. We're able to gain quite a few life with this deck. There are a few cards that utilize our life as an advantage in this deck. We can go a couple of different ways in this deck, and we can win either by going wide and having a bunch of cats on the battlefield, tokens that we can pump up, or we can get in with just an alpha strike on one of our equipped cats, maybe our commander, and then using Arahbo's ability to double our cat's power and get in for a ton of damage. Let's start out this deck tech by talking about all the ramp that we include in this deck. Now, cats don't cost a lot of mana, but we do want to have a lot of ramp in this deck so we can play a lot of creatures and draw cards off of our card draw engines that we have in this deck. So first up, we have Soul Ring. It's 1 colorless for an artifact. You can tap to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Rampant Growth is going to let us search our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. And then Farseek lets us search for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then we have Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, both of which let us search our library for 2 basic lands, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into our hand. And then Explosive Vegetation is 3 and a green. It lets us search for 2 basic land cards and put both onto the battlefield tapped. These are all really great ways of getting some more mana onto the battlefield early so that we're able to play our creatures and start accruing value off of our draw engines that we have in this deck, which we'll go over in just a moment. We want a lot of ways of drawing cards in this deck so that we can continue to play our cats and put a lot of pressure onto the board. Since we are playing a creature-focused strategy, 1 board wipe is all it takes to reset us back to the Stone Age and put us in a really bad position. We do need creatures to win with this deck. So first up, we have Zendikar Resurgent. It's 5 white for an enchantment. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land produce. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you can draw a card. And then we have Guardian Project. It's 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. In Commander, this just always lets us draw a card whenever we play a creature, since it is a singleton format. And then we have Vanquisher's Banner. It's 5 colorless for an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. And then creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. Not only does this give us an Anthem effect, it also lets us draw a lot of cards too, which is really good. Then we have Lifecrafter's Bestiary. It's 3 colorless for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can scry 1. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card. Then we have Rishkar's Expertise. It's 4 green for a sorcery. Draw cards equal to the greatest number among creatures you control, and you may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. This is a very powerful card. It's going to draw you a ton of cards and also let you put your best card in your hand that's 5 or less onto the battlefield. And then we have Return of the Wild Speaker. It's 4 and a green for an instant on the Throne of Eldraine. You can choose one. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. And then non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. This card's very strong as it can pump up all your cat tokens and make them 4/4 or 5/5 cats, or just let you draw a ton of cards with your Arahbo trigger and pumping your creatures up. You can use Return of the Wild Speaker and draw a ton of cards off of that cat that you just pumped up. Since we are playing a tribal strategy in that we're playing a ton of cats in this deck, there are some cards that synergize really well with tribal themes that we wanted to include in this deck. And the first one is Radiant Destiny. It's 2 and a white for an enchantment that has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. As long as you have the City's Blessing, they also have Vigilance. And then we also have Door of Destinies. It's 4 colorless for an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. This card can get out of hand extremely quickly, as every cat that you cast is going to put a counter on Door of Destinies, and every counter gives your creatures +1/+1. And then we have Icon of Ancestry. It's 3 colorless for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can pay 3 and tap it. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card of the chosen type from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And the first kitties that we want to talk about are legendary kitties, and the first one we have is Bramaz, King of Ereskos. It's 1 white for a legendary creature with Vigilance. Whenever it attacks, you're going to put a 1/1 white cat soldier creature token with Vigilance onto the battlefield attacking. Whenever it blocks a creature, you also put a 1/1 cat onto the battlefield, blocking the creature. Bramaz makes a lot of tokens quickly in this deck. You can get Bramaz down onto the battlefield very early in the game, and he's going to make a lot of cat tokens over the course of the game as he attacks and blocks other creatures. Then we have Nazan, Revered Bladesmith. It's 4, a green and a white for a legendary creature. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for an equipment card and reveal it. If you reveal a card named Hammer of Nazan this way, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. Whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, you may tap target creature defending player controls. While we don't have Hammer of Nazan in our deck because it costs about $20, we did include quite a few equipment in this deck that Nazan is going to be able to tutor when he enters the battlefield, and the ability where he can tap creatures whenever an equipped creature attacks is also very powerful, as we do want to have a way of clearing out blockers for our alpha strikes with our cats. Then we have Kemba Ka Regent. It's 1 white for a legendary creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 2/2 white cat creature token for each equipment attached to Kemba Ka Regent. Like I said before, we do have a lot of equipment in this deck, and Kemba works really well with equipment, and she's also really good at putting more cats onto the battlefield, which is something that we want to do in this deck. Then we have Jareth Leonin Titan. It's 3 white for a legendary creature. Whenever it blocks, it gets +7/+7 until end of turn. And you can pay a white and it gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Then we have Jedit. It's a legendary creature that has Forest Walk. Whenever it attacks or blocks, create a 2/2 green cat warrior creature token with Forest Walk. This is just another great way of creating tokens in this deck. And then we have Jazzle Goldmane. It's 2 white for a legendary creature with First Strike. You can pay 3 white and attacking creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. As you can see by the theme of this deck, we do have a lot of tokens, and we will be able to go wide very easily in this deck. Being able to pump all of our creatures by the amount of attacking creatures is very powerful. And then we have another card that's included in the Secret Lair drop, and it's Miri Weatherlight Duelist. It's 1, a green and a white for a legendary creature with First Strike. Whenever Miri Weatherlight Duelist attacks, each opponent can't block with more than 1 creature this combat. And as long as it's tapped, no more than 1 creature can attack you each combat. This card is extremely powerful as it can narrow down the amount of creatures that can block us when we're going wide, and also make it difficult to block the creature that we pump with Arahbo's abilities. Next up, we have a few cats that give us additional ways of creating cat tokens, and the first one is Regal Caracal. It's 3 white for a creature. Other cats you control have +1/+1 and have lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. Not only does this pump your creatures up, it also gives you a few cats onto the battlefield with it, making this a really great cat to include in your deck. And it is part of the Secret Lair drop too, which has some amazing art with it. And then we have Leonin Warleader. It's 2 white for a creature. Whenever it attacks, you can create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink that are tapped and attacking. This is another card that comes in the secret drop and is a very powerful one, as we will make additional cat tokens off of it whenever we attack. And then next up we have Pride Sovereign. It's 2 and a green for a creature. Pride Sovereign gets +1/+1 for each other cat you control, and then you can pay 1 and tap it, exert Pride Sovereign. Create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. An exerted creature won't untap during your next untap step. Then we have a new one out of Throne of Eldraine, and it's Keeper of Fables. It's 3 green for a creature. Whenever one or more non-human creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So this is going to make it to where whenever your cats get in for damage, you're going to be able to draw cards and accrue a lot of value off of this card. Next up we have Prowling Serpapard. It's 1 green for a creature that can't be countered. And then creature spells you control can't be countered. This deck's going to be very weak to counter spells, as you won't have a way of interacting with them in a green-white deck, and Prowling Serpapard gives you a really great way of making sure that your powerful cats will hit the battlefield. Next up we have Temur Sabertooth. It's 2 green for a creature. You can pay 1 and a green, and you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, Temur Sabertooth gains indestructible until end of turn. This is a really great card for protecting other cards in your deck, and also gives you a way of returning cards with ETBs back to your hand, so that you can replay them and accrue additional value. This is one of the best cats in this deck. Then we have Stalking Leonin. It's 2 and a white for a creature. When it enters the battlefield, secretly choose an opponent. Reveal the player you choose. Exile target creature that's attacking you if it's controlled by the chosen player. Activate this ability only once. And then we have Oreskos Explorer, and it's 1 and a white for a creature. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for up to X planes cards, where X is the number of players who control more lands than you. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. This is almost like a land tax light, and is a really great cat to include in the deck to get some additional lands into your hand when you play it, and also gives you another cat in your deck. Then we have Set's Tiger. It's 2 white for a creature with flash. When it enters the battlefield, you gain protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. This card gives you an ability that you don't really see too often in this game, in giving yourself some protection. If your opponent tries to win the game with something like a Comet Storm, you can flash in Set's Tiger, give yourself protection from red, and then your opponents won't be able to kill you in that turn, which is a really powerful ability. Next up we have King of the Pride. It's 2 and a white for a creature that says other cats you control get +2/+1. There aren't very many cat lords out there, and King of the Pride gives you a really great way of pumping your cats up and giving them some additional reach in the game. And then we have Hungry Lynx, and it's 1 and a green for a creature. Cats you control have protection from rats. At the beginning of your end step, target opponent creates a 1/1 black rat creature token with Death Touch. Whenever a rat dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control. This gives you a really great way of pumping up your cats when your opponents go to attack or block with their rats. And then we have Felidar Sovereign. It's 4 white for a creature with vigilance and lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. This is another very powerful alternate win con in this deck. There's a sub synergy of lifelink in this deck, and Felidar Sovereign goes along with that strategy. Then we have Kasali Pridemage. It's a green and a white for a creature with Exalted. And you can pay 1 and sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Felidar Cub is 1 and a white, and it does the same thing where you can sacrifice it and destroy target enchantment. And then Leonin Relic Warder is white for a creature. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target artifact or enchantment, and when it leaves the battlefield, you get to return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. These all give you a really nice way of dealing with artifacts and enchantments and put an extra cat onto the board as well. Then we have Alms Collector. It's 3 and a white for a creature with flash. If an opponent would draw 2 or more cards, instead you and that player each draw a card. This gives you some much needed card advantage in this deck, as you are playing white-green, which are colors that don't have the greatest card draw strength in them. And when your opponents go to draw those extra cards, you can play the Alms Collector and draw an extra card off of it. Then we have Fleece Mainline. It's a green and a white for a creature with monstrosity. If this creature isn't monstrous, put a +1/+1 counter on it and it becomes monstrous. As long as it is monstrous, it has hexproof and indestructible. And then there's Sacred Cat. It's 1 white for a creature with lifelink, and it has Embalm 1. You can exile the card from your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a white zombie cat with no mana cost. Embalm only as a sorcery. And then the very last cat in the deck is Kasali Slingers. It's 4 and a green for a creature with reach. Whenever Kasali Slingers or another cat enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is another really powerful card in this deck, as you can kill a lot of artifacts and enchantments as you play your cats. The next card I want to talk about gives us a lot of cat tokens for a relatively good rate, and it's White Sun Zenith. It's X white for an instant. Create X 2/2 white cat creature tokens. Shuffle it in its owner's library. This is a repeatable effect to give us a ton of cat tokens, to put a lot of pressure on our opponents, and give us another way of going wide in this deck. We included a couple of planeswalkers in our deck that have synergies with what we're trying to do in this deck, and they're also cats. And the first one is Ajani Wise Counselor. It's 3 white for a legendary planeswalker. You can +2 and you gain 1 life for each creature you control, and then you can -3, creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn, and then you can -9, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature where X is your life total. This is really great because we do have a life gain sub-theme in this deck, and we do care about making our creatures bigger, which is something that Ajani's going to help us do in this deck as well. And then we have Ajani Adversary of Tyrants. It's 2 white for a planeswalker. You can +1, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, -2, return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then -7. You get an emblem at the beginning of your end step, create 3 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink. This is a really great way of getting your cats bigger by putting +1/+1 counters on them, and it also does give you some recursion, which is something that we don't really have a great way of doing in white as well. Next up, we're going to talk about a couple of ways that we're able to interact in this deck. Since we are playing green and white, we don't have a lot of ways to interact with our opponent's creatures, but there are a few notable ways. The first being Swords to Plowshares. It's 1 white mana for an instant. Exile target creature, its controller gains life equal to its power. And then we have Generous Gift, which is 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. And then Beast Within does the same thing, except it creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. These are all efficient ways of dealing with your opponent's threats on the board. We wanted a couple of ways of dealing with the board in case things got out of hand, so we included a couple of board wipes in the deck. Since we are playing a creature-focused strategy, board wipes are very good against our deck, so we don't want to include a ton of them. So the ones that we chose to play in this deck do have an upside for us. And the first one is Divine Reckoning. It's 2 white for a sorcery. Each player chooses a creature they control, destroy the rest. And it does also have flashback for 5 white. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost, then exile it. So this gives us a way of board wiping twice, and also lets us choose our best creature so that we're not completely set back to the Stone Age and having to rebuild. We can keep our Arahbo on the board and then still have a way of rebuilding from that point on. And then we also included Cleansing Nova. It's 3 white for a sorcery, and you can choose one. Destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. This is a very powerful modal board wipe, as you can completely wipe the board of all creatures, and you can also choose artifacts or enchantments if your opponents got off to a very fast start and have a lot of artifact ramp, or are playing a stack strategy that you're very weak to. Next up, we have a card that you can play with a couple of different effects in the deck, and it's Citadel Siege. It's 2 white for an enchantment. As it enters the battlefield, you can choose Khans or Dragons. If you choose Khans at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. And if you choose Dragons at the beginning of combat on each opponent's turn, tap target creature that player controls. This is a great card for 2 reasons. First, it's going to help your cats get bigger, which is something that we want to do with Arahbo, as we want our cat's power to be as high as possible so that when we double it with Arahbo's ability, we get in for a lot of damage. This card also gives you the ability to tap down a creature on each of your opponent's combat steps, making it easier for you to get in damage with Arahbo's ability on your cats. Some of the best ways of adding power to our creatures is with equipment, and there is an equipment sub-theme in this deck because there are some creatures in our deck that give us value when we have equipment attached to them. So first up, we have Stoneforge Masterwork. It's 1 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it, and then you can equip for 2. This is one of the better ones in the deck since we are playing tribal. With Stoneforge Masterwork on the battlefield and a bunch of cats, we're going to be able to swing in for a lot of damage. And if we do have Arahbo on the battlefield, we'll be able to double that and get in for quite a bit. Then we have Blackblade Reforged. It's 2 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control. You can equip a legendary creature for 3 or equip a regular creature for 7. And then we have Hero's Blade. It's 2 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+2. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach Hero's Blade to it, and it has an equip cost of 4. Next up, we have Sword of Vengeance. 3 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and you can equip for 3. And then we have a couple of equipments that give us lifelink, which is a sub-theme that we have in this deck. The first one being Loxodon Warhammer. It's 3 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has Trample and lifelink. And it has equip cost of 3. And then we have Behemoth Sledge. It's 1 a green and a white for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has lifelink and Trample. Its equip cost is 3. Next up is a piece of equipment that gives us some synergy when we're playing a tribal strategy, and it's Heirloom Blade. It's 3 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+1. Whenever equipped creature dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card that shares a creature type with it. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and you can equip it for just 1. And then we have Forebear's Blade. It's 3 colorless for an equipment. Equipped creature has +3/+0 and has Vigilance and Trample. And whenever it dies, you can attach Forebear's Blade to target creature you control. And you can equip it for 3. Next up, we have one of the best pieces of protection in our deck, and it's Swiftfoot Boots. It's 2 colorless for an equipment that gives your equipped creature hexproof and haste, and you can equip it for 1. Now, Lightning Greaves would be a great addition in this deck too, but it's a little bit outside of our budget at about $6 for the card. And then we have one of the best equipments of all in our deck that works really well with this strategy as we are making a lot of tokens, and it's Skull Clamp. It's 1 colorless mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. When equipped creature is put into a graveyard, draw 2 cards, and you can equip it for 1. This is one of the most powerful artifacts in the game. If you have a lot of tokens that you can equip Skull Clamp to draw a lot of cards, it's a very worthwhile card. Next up, let's talk about the mana base that we have for this deck. So first up, we have Sunpetal Grove. It's a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest or a plains, and you can tap to add a green or a white to your mana pool. Selesnya Sanctuary enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you have to return a land you control to owner's hand, but the upside is you can tap for a green and a white. And then Croson Verge is a land that enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay 2 and tap it, search your library for a forest and a plains card, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Unclaimed Territory is a land that when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and you can tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool, or tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Spend that mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. Command Tower is a land that enters the battlefield untapped and lets you add a mana of any color to your mana pool based on your commander's color identity. Mosswort Bridge is a hideaway land. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it does, you get to look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library. You can tap to add a green to your mana pool, or pay a green and tap it. You may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if creatures you control have a total power of 10 or greater. Now, you don't have to have one creature with power 10 or greater. It can be across all of your creatures. So this works really great with Arahbo's ability and also with the Go Wide strategy that we have in this deck as well. Rogue's Passage is a land that you can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay 4 and tap it, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. This is really great when you pump up your creatures with Arahbo, or if you have a creature that's equipped with a lot of equipment, you can give them unblockable and your opponents won't be able to block them and get a lot of damage in. Gavany Township is a land that you can tap to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay 2, a green and a white, and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This is a really great land for our Go Wide strategy that we have in this deck. And then last but not least, we have 15 plains and 12 forests in this deck. There are more white sources needed for this deck than there are green, so we included more plains in the deck. Thank you so much for watching this Budget Deck Tech today. If you have any suggestions for some of the picks in this deck, or agree with or disagree with some of the choices, let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and check us out on Patreon over at patreon.com/BudgetEDH. There's a lot of different tiers for rewards over on Patreon. See you guys next time.